Hi, this is Herb Cohen. I want to invite you to my pond where we can continue a discussion about how to use mindfulness. And we're going to be looking at how our mind creates separation and separateness. And we separate things very, very finely, even. And we're going to actually use the pond as an example, a demonstration of how our mind picks things out, creates separation, and how that affects us in our ego state and how we moves us away from mindfulness by the separation. It narrows us down into really a quite a limited scope of being, and how we can actually cut through that and expand and embrace mindfulness and awareness. So join me now as we begin that discussion.
This morning I saw this beautiful lotus blossom in my pond, and it's just really so magnificent. I don't think the video does it justice to see this. It's so captivating and stunning, and the pond is just really an interesting place for me. It's an interesting teacher. The experience of managing this pond has been really wonderful. It's been like a Zen master, and the fish have been wonderful teachers as well. And managing a pond is kind of complicated. There's a lot to it, and there's so much that reflects how we think and what our mind is and how we separate things. And so when we look at this flower, we pick it out and we say, oh my gosh, look at that flower. And we separate it from our experience of the rest of the pond. With maybe exception when the fish come by. We might say, ooh, there's a fish. And they have their own magnificence. But what we need to understand is that our mind is selectively focusing and selectively separating things, and that this is very much a mental function. It's a reflection of how our mind works. Thich Nhat Hanh said, hey, that lotus flower wouldn't be there if not for the mud that it grows from. It is interdependent on the mud. And so the manifestation of the flower, which wouldn't be able to manifest into this brilliant experience, is actually at the same time the experience of the mud that it comes from. They're not separate, they're interdependent, and they couldn't be without each other, nor without the clouds and the rain that also contribute to this plant's being. So when we look at the flower, Thich Nhat Hanh says we are actually experiencing the sky, the clouds, the rain, and the mud, because these are the things that are responsible for its manifestation all at once. So looking at the pond, we can see that there is mud, that there are other things moving around in the pond, living in the pond, that there's a whole ecosystem here that actually is a mirror of our mind. And we can use the pond in that way. And so one of the things that we can capture right away is how we scan this pond and create separation. Mentally, we're picking things out, we're picking the flower out, and we're creating separateness.
When I was in art school, I took this class where I learned how to paint with this Chinese rice paper. And the paper, I didn't realize that this paper was this magic paper that could reflect back how your mind saw things. So I had this big fat soup carrot, and it split open, and I washed in the shade of the carrot with this ground ink and on this tissue thin paper. And I then washed in a darker shade for the upper part of the crack that was in shadow, and a lighter shade for the lower part of the crack. And when it dried, the paper separated the crack about 4 inches from the carrot. So there's the carrot sitting back here on the paper, and the crack separated from the carrot 4 inches and floated in front. And the teacher comes over and she goes, in your mind, you separated the crack from the carrot. But the crack is the carrot. Just get this off the wall. And I was like, kind of like blown away. I was like, wow, this paper is reflecting how I see. And I wasn't really aware that my mind was creating these separations. Just as when we look at the flower, we separate the flower from the other water flowers, the other plants. We separate it from the pond. We separate it from the mud. And we don't realize that without the mud, there's no flower. And we do this with our mind. We create these micro separations. And the biggest separation that we do, the more gross separation that we do, is we separate ourselves. So it becomes the experience of, I see the flower, and now the flower is separate from me, because I'm creating a separate I or me to experience the flower and say, gee, seeing that flower makes me feel nice inside. Well, that major separation is a bigger form of separateness. The flower itself is separate. That's a minor separation. And now we're creating even a bigger separation. And so this kind of separation of I or me is where we can end up in trouble, because if we have a past that's not pretty, we filter everything through I or me, and that filter distorts things so that I can experience pain, shame, or fear. And this is where the lack of separation through I or me state that we manifest this illusion that I am separate from what I'm experiencing behind you. I'm not separate from this. I'm in this environment. I'm hearing the water falling. I'm feeling the temperature of the air. I'm got the skylight reflecting off my face. I can't get the sky off my face. I can't separate from what I'm experiencing right now, talking to you. I'm part of this experience. And this is using awareness. I'm using my sense of smell, my vision, my hearing, my taste, touch. I'm using all my senses to join awareness to my experience of being. And there's no separateness. There's no I or me necessary. I don't have to be Herb to experience what I'm experiencing right now. In fact, this pond has nothing to do with me. I don't have to be Herb or my history has nothing to do with the experience of this pond. And those fish in there have they have no need to know anything about me as their pond keeper. They're in an environment that has no separation at all. They don't have an ego state. We manifest this illusion of separateness as part of being in the world. It's very useful to have the separateness, and it helps us function in society. We have a separate place to live, a separate bank account, a separate car, separate things. So we need to have some separateness. But the separateness goes a little too far, and it interferes with our state of being in the world by creating, just by not understanding that this is an illusion, the separateness. It's useful, we use it, we don't need to throw it out, we can keep it, but we need to understand that the concept of who I am as history is an idea, and it's a bunch of thoughts. And the idea of self-referencing is just a mental activity that strings these things together and creates a filter, a very distorting filter. And so if I bypass that by recognizing that I am everything that I experience right at this moment, that I'm not separate from anything, and it's impossible to separate me. I can't take the sky off my skin. That I can't stop the sound of the waterfalls. I can't not hear that. This is me interacting with everything that I experience. There's no me.
There's no I. That's just an idea. For everything that's manifested around me, that I'm surrounded by, to manifest, it doesn't require me to have an ego state, or to be self-identified, or to have a history. It has nothing to do with that. Energetically, I'm experiencing everything here that's happening, and I'm in agreement with it energetically, and thus we are part of one giant manifestation with no separateness. So how does separation cause fear or manifest shame or other unpleasant emotions, or physical pain for that matter? When I work with people who have chronic physical pain, when we process that, it goes back to separation. It goes back to ego state. It looks at places where our ego state has created separation and has hid them underneath a rock, underneath something in our life that we're not seeing. And so the body says, whoa, you need to notice this. We're going to make you notice this by creating stiffness and pain, and we're going to call attention to that. And it's amazing. It's this separateness that's been created. And when we call into awareness the separation, and we desensitize whatever that issue is, or even just talk about it, deepen our awareness of it and see what we can do to remedy this, the pain goes away. And if we look at emotional pain, fear, and shame, all these things are dependent on separateness. It's dependent on me having a separate I or a separate me to experience them. And they're attached to the history that we've held on to, attached to this illusionary idea that I'm a separate me and a separate self. And so our fear, our shame, our everything, that all our suffering is hanging on an illusion. And an illusion that is manifested in the separateness of experience. If we come into awareness, if I'm just using my sense of smell, my sense of hearing, what I hear, what I see, what I taste, and my sense of knowing, I can be present right now and not experience any of those unpleasantries. I can just be. And I can be and resonate at the same frequency, in this case, of running water, or a pond with a beautiful water lily rooted in mud. And I can be the mud, and I can be the flower. It just as the fish experience it. I can learn from the fish that there's no separation.